Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. Support companies are often the most important part of a division template. Using them and using the right ones is not just important, it is fundamental to succeed. So today we will rank every single support company in the game from best to worst. If that sounds interesting, you're in the right place. As always, if you enjoy the content I make, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing and leaving a comment. It really helps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments and make sure to join our Discord to meet our amazing community. And now, let's get started. Just a quick reminder, the full tier list, still secret here, is available along with a document describing each company in detail to tier 2 members of the channel in the usual shared folder. I will also take this chance to thank every single member of the channel for keeping this project alive. All of this would not be possible without you. Now, before we dive into the rankings, let's go over a couple of ground rules. So first of all, the list you're about to see is single player oriented. And while most support companies are pretty much universally viable, some of them certainly perform differently in single player and in multiplayer, so please keep that in mind as we proceed. Lastly, obviously, but still worth mentioning, this is a subjective tier list that reflects how often I use these support companies in my runs and in my guides. That said, I'd love to hear your take on it, so be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And with that said, let's unveil our lowest tier, the C tier for niche support companies. What do we have in here? Well, a lot of stuff I honestly never used. Starting with the super heavy tank company. I mean, just look at those terrain modifiers and you understand why I never once used the super heavy support company. I guess it could work in mimish builds, although now it might be outperformed entirely by the land cruiser, which can get better stats and even worse terrain malices. Now, next we have the heavy and the light flame tank companies, and I do expect some controversy here, especially because the light flame tank is not bad at all. Now, the main reason they are down here is the existence of the medium flame tank company. I see very little reasons to opt for anything but that. Next, we have the motorized military police, another company I think I never used in any of my runs or guides. And I mean, I see absolutely no reason to go over the trouble of researching it to get something which is basically the same as the regular military police but more expensive. Speaking of which, the same more or less applies to the armored version of the maintenance, signal and engineer companies. These require an extra research, they are more expensive, they require an additional production line, and they are not even better than the regular version most of the time. Next we have the light armored recon, and this one is actually not bad. If we go into the game and check it out, you can see that it adds nice movement bonuses and quite a lot of breakthrough, which can be very good on infantry. However, it is fairly expensive, it requires fuel, and we just have so many better options for this recon slot. Next we have the land cruiser, which we already mentioned before. This is just mimish. From the look to any use of it, it can work in mimish builds, but yeah, it remains niche. And the niche is the super heavy self-propelled artillery. While this one is not bad per se, it adds soft attack, which is always good. There are not many reasons to research it over the regular super heavy artillery, and even more over rocket artillery or support artillery. Now, I do expect some controversy over the next 2, maybe 3 support companies, because these ones are not bad at all. Now, the signal company, for example, adds a lot of initiative, and higher initiative means more reinforcements into the battle and faster ones, faster planning, and it multiplies your coordination, which is a hidden but very important stat in the game. So why is the signal company down here in my tier list? Well, the reason is simple. There is just too much competition for support company slots, and there are better options, in my opinion, than the signal company. The same more or less applies to maintenance. This is another one that could be much higher depending on the situation, because the maintenance company is great for capturing enemy equipment. Now, it does also increase reliability, which can be nice on tanks, but overall it's better to have the reliability you need on your tanks beforehand, and you can achieve that with the design. What really matters here is the bonus to equipment capture ratio. Now this can be absolutely fundamental when playing as a miner without resources, as you can steal them from your opponents. Still, as we said earlier, the competition is high and this is situational at best. But in my opinion it's a bit less than situational and I still consider it to be niche. And the last one here, controversial one but easily explained, the anti-tank support company. Now, the anti-tank adds hard attack and piercing to your divisions and it will allow you to pierce armored divisions. The thing is, while this is absolutely a must for most builds in multiplayer, it is pretty much useless in single player just because the AI does not make proper armored divisions. So most of the time adding the support anti-tank is completely useless. And with that, boys, we can move up one tier and unveil our situational tier. And in here, as you can see, there are quite a lot of helicopters hanging out. Why is that? Now, unlike the armored companies, which as I mentioned earlier often are even worse than the regular counterparts, the helicopter companies tend to be slightly better than the regular versions. So what's the problem with them? Well, the problem is you need a special facility, special project, an additional research, an additional production line, and that's quite a lot of trouble to get a support company that is a bit more expensive and only slightly better than the regular one. For instance, here is a comparison between the regular logistics company and the helicopter logistics company. And as you can see, you have an additional minus 9% supply usage, but you also have a plus 20% fuel usage and the additional production cost. So yeah, slightly better, but is it worth the effort? In my opinion, it is not. One thing worth mentioning though is that once you get the helicopter without even the additional researches, you unlock the helicopter brigade, which is interesting because it acts a bit as a mix of all of those companies. A bit of recon, a bit of war support protection from the field hospital, a bit of experience loss from the field hospital, and supply usage reduction from the logistics. So a mix of everything in just one support company, not too bad. To sum up, I wouldn't go through the trouble of getting them, but if you already start with a facility, if you have access to them, if you have nothing else to make, well then sure, use them. Next, we have the Military Police Support Company, and this one is interesting. Now, the Military Police is good for a couple of things. Obviously, the suppression bonus is great, so you want to combine it with a large cavalry garrison template to protect your occupied lands. But that's not the only use for Military Police. As you can see here, it also gives pretty decent stats. Decent soft attack, very nice defense, and especially very nice extra recovery rate. Let's move on to the next one, again possibly a controversial one, with the Pioneers being fairly low on my tier list. Why is that? So Pioneers actually give amazing terrain bonuses. Just look at that, look at the river and amphibious attack and movement bonuses. Absolutely fantastic, but very specific. Now, first of all, to unlock them, you need the Marines and Marine Special Doctrines, which are more situational than, say, Mountaineers, more universally good. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, the Pioneers take the Engineer Company slot, which is a very precious slot, as we will see later. Moreover, in single player, disembarking in naval invasions is very rarely an issue. The AI tends not to protect particularly the rivers, and you fight in marshes a lot less than you fight in hills and mountains. Now, you can also spec them into jungles if you plan to fight in the jungles, but again, all of this makes them more situational, so that's why they are in this tier and not in a higher one. Next, we have the Super Heavy Artillery. Now, the Super Heavy Artillery is good because everything that adds quite a lot of soft attack for no extra width is always good, especially in single player. Now, the main reason this is down in the situational tier is that it requires a land facility and a special project. It can also get fairly expensive, especially when compared to the regular support artillery. The other issue is that in terms of land facility special projects, we have much higher priorities, so you're unlikely to get these early. Next, we have two very similar and interesting support companies with the Airborne Armor and the Light Recon. Let's start with the Light Armored Recon Company, because this is actually an absolute must in multiplayer on your armored templates, as it increases the hard attack on all tanks. However, in single player, hard attack is much less important, which makes this support company not as useful. Still, the light recon can be used, same as the airborne light armor, for something very interesting. You can use it to make some very cheap space marines by designing a dedicated tank with a lot of armor and ideally a lot of breakthrough. Something like this could work. Now when you add these to an infantry template, you increase their armor, often making them impossible to pierce for enemy basic infantry. And the same exact thing can be done very effectively, even more effectively, on paratroopers, which by default could not use space marine tanks in the division template. This is a little cheesy, definitely not my style, but I cannot deny that it can help in certain situations. Next, we have two recon companies, the regular recon and motorized recon. Here the extra stats are certainly nothing to write home about, but the additional movement speed is always nice, especially on your armored templates. And while reconnaissance is not the most important or impactful stat in the game, it can still be nice to outperform your opponents and pick better tactics. When it comes to motorized recon, this tends to be slightly better than regular recon, but it is also a bit more expensive and especially it adds fuel usage to your divisions, which means generally I try to avoid it with infantry and I use it for my motorized and armored templates. To end the tier, we have another very interesting support company in the field hospital. Now here I must admit I was very much undecided whether to bring this up one tier or leave it into the situational tier. Let me explain why the field hospital is so good. Field hospitals are often overlooked, but they're actually absolutely great, both with infantry and with armored templates. Although for two different reasons. With infantry, as you can see, the field hospital can be absolutely vital to preserve your manpower and war support. So much that if you plan to push with infantry, I would consider this a must-have support company. But that's not all. The reduced experience loss, here minus 45% with all technologies, is absolutely great to increase the training tier of your divisions. This is one of the only ways to achieve higher tiers than regular, and don't forget that the difference between each tier is always a 25% additional combat effectiveness, which is huge, absolutely huge. But that's not all, because in addition to all of that, field hospitals also give a very nice extra 10% HP on all infantry, motorized and mechanized. Now this is particularly useful on armored templates, which often lack the HP of infantry templates. So overall, the field hospital is a really good support company in many situations. So what's so good to keep it in the situational tier and not up one tier? Well, let's check it out as we move on to our A great tier. What do we have in here? First of all, we have the Rocket Artillery Support Company. Now here the concept is very simple. Extra soft attack, fairly cheap, no additional combat width. What's not to like? Moreover, this can be combined with support artillery and with super heavy artillery to make a division with insane soft attack coming just from support companies. Incredibly powerful, especially on superior firepower. Next, we have another easy one to explain: logistics. Supplies are one of the, if not the most important element in the game to determine a successful offensive or even defense, and anything in the game that reduces the supply usage is always great. Whether that's martial traits like Logistic Wizard, spirits like the Logistical Focus, or support companies like the Logistics Company. This is an absolute must on large armored divisions and generally very useful on all large templates. Next, we have another great classic with the Anti-Air Company, another very solid company that you almost always want to use. Why is that? Anti-Air is always great for two reasons. First of all, it massively reduces enemy cast damage, which has a huge impact on the battlefield. Now, when you don't have air superiority, this becomes an absolute must top tier support company. When you do have the air superiority, it is still a useful one, because it adds quite a bit of piercing. So anti-air can work as a bit of a basic and cheaper anti-tank as well. Next and last for the A great support companies tier, we have another potentially controversial one with the Basic Engineer Company. Now, Some people tend to dislike the basic engineer company because it is fairly expensive, especially in terms of support equipment, and because before later attacks, it does not provide offensive buffs. And these are valid points. However, the extra defense that you get right away and the extra entrenchment on all infantry are still very good buffs to have. I would say they are absolutely mandatory on any defensive template, but they are still very good even on offensive templates. And the reason is that even if you plan to use those divisions offensively, you will very likely also have to defend at some point, so having extra entrenchment and defense is very good. Moreover, once you do unlock the later attacks, as you can see, you get some amazing offensive buffs. Another reason to rank the engineer company so high is how easily available it is. You're likely to already have it on most of your templates in most of your runs, and just keep it for the rest of the run. And now boys, it is time for the highest tier. Who is going to take the top in my tier list? Let's find out. So for the S tier with the best support companies, the first thing we have in here is the Rangers support company. Now Rangers are similar to Pioneers, which we covered before. So why are they up 2 tiers? Well, for a few reasons. First of all, Mountaineers are generally better than Marines, so if you have to pick one, most of the time you want to go with the Mountaineers. Secondly, you are more likely to fight in forests, hills and mountains rather than amphibious and marshes. Third, and very important, they take the recon slot, not the engineer slot. And in the recon slot there is much less competition. In addition to all of that, they even have very good base stats. So you get extra soft attack, defense, breakthrough. They are just amazing from all points of view. And speaking of amazing, let's talk about the next 2 support companies. We have the Assault Engineers, a very new one added in Götterdämmerung, and a great classic, the Medium Flame Tank. Now both of these support companies require a LAN facility, a special project, and an additional production line. And for stuff like this I penalize some other companies, so how come the Medium Flame Tank and the Assault Engineers are still at the top of the tier? Well, the answer is right there in front of you. The amazing terrain bonuses. Both the Medium Flame Tank company and the Assault Engineers provide incredible terrain buffs. And terrain buffs are probably the best possible buffs you can get in the game. This is the reason why companies like these are at the very top of the list, and stuff like the Land Cruiser or Super Heavy Tank are at the very bottom. These companies are great in single player, they are great in multiplayer, they are great with armored divisions, they are great with infantry divisions, they are great with special forces divisions. They are just the very best. And speaking of the best, for our top tier, top pick, we have a very basic support company. Support Artillery. Now, while there can be a debate about the usefulness of line artillery, there is no debate about support artillery. Support artillery is just great, and it is so for very simple reasons. Great extra soft attack for no extra combat width is amazing, as we already mentioned for the rocket artillery and super heavy artillery. However, unlike the super heavy artillery and the rocket artillery, support artillery is usually available right away. Often it is already in your division template when you start the game. So no extra researches, available right away, very cheap, it's just a great pick. And this is the only support company that I tend to put in every single template I make. Of course it goes in all of my offensive templates, but it's actually very good even defensively, so when you can afford it, adding it to your defensive templates will boost them significantly. And boys, with that, we got to the end of this very long tier list. There are now a huge amount of support companies, maybe a bit too many, most of them you actually never use, but well, that's another topic. So that's it for me and for my very personal tier list. Now I want to hear your opinion. Which support companies are a must for you, and what would you change in my ranking? Make sure to let me know in the comments. And guys, if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Other than that, thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video. Bye bye!